For me, really, I grew up in it, unwittingly so. I think I was in my first makeup room before I could even reach the countertop. My father was a film makeup artist. He worked on great movies, and I knew the smell of makeup before I knew really what makeup was. I had no idea. So I was too young. I mean, I probably wasn't even 4 years old. Um,
Wow.
and yeah, he worked on great things. He did 2001, Mary Queen of Scots, Lawrence of Arabia. He worked with Charlie Parker on that one.
Wow.
Stuart Freeborn, of course, on 2001. In fact, we have the Dawn of Man suits in our garage reeking because they were foam rubber. So our house smelt really interesting. It was a combination of Maltese food from my mother and then foam rubber from whatever my father was doing.
Welcome to the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, the podcast by filmmakers for filmmakers. My name is Andrew, and I'm joined alongside my co-host Jeff, as always. Jeff and I are writers and directors and passionate about the art of storytelling. Filmmaker Mixer is a creative hub where aspiring and established filmmakers come together to share experiences, insights, strategies, and inspiration.
Hello, everybody. This is the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, and today we are chatting with Sian Richards, the makeup designer for Sinners, which was a terrific film and such a popular film. So I'm really excited to talk with you, Sian. So welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Before we get into Sinners, I'm curious about you and your background and how you got interested in storytelling and film. And I'll just give a preface right now. We're having a bit of technical difficulty, so if it freezes up, we'll figure it out. But we'll try to muddle through it as best we can. But tell us about you and how you got involved in film and storytelling.
Well, for me, really, I grew up in it, unwittingly so. I think I was in my first makeup room before I could even reach the countertop. I think it was, I don't know, it could have been Twickenham actually. It was either Twickenham, Shepperton, or something like that. My father was a film makeup artist. He worked on great movies, and I knew the smell of makeup before I knew really what makeup was. I had no idea. So I was too young. I mean, I probably wasn't even 4 years old. Um,
Wow.
and yeah, he worked on great things. He did 2001, Mary Queen of Scots, Lawrence of Arabia. He worked with Charlie Parker on that one.
Wow.
Stuart Freeborn, of course, on 2001. In fact, we have the Dawn of Man suits in our garage reeking because they were foam rubber. So our house smelt really interesting. It was a combination of Maltese food from my mother and then foam rubber from whatever my father was doing. And so, the Welsh side of the family, my father's side, they were all quite theatrical. My Aunt Thelma trod the boards. She was married to a comedy actor who used to be in lots of black and white movies and comedy shows later on in his life, Leslie Dwyer. My other aunts, they all sang, they all performed. It might not have been famously, but they performed regionally and did concerts. And Dada was actually the quietest one of the lot. And he got into film quite by chance. When he came back from serving for Britain, he sort of somehow landed up in theatre, and it developed over time into film, into taking his skill into film. He had a great color sense, and my mother attributed my color sense to being very reminiscent of his. He passed when I was 12. Some could say I am connecting to my father through my work. I'm sure any good therapist will do that. Um, I would probably agree with them. But the bottom line is, I love film. I was lucky enough to grow up seeing, and I loved British film and European film. We saw just incredible stuff. And then Hollywood, the huge Cecil B. DeMille, all of those were my staples. Technicolor, Danny Kaye, all of these things had amazing time. And then Douglas Trumbull and all of this sort of stuff. So I'm a total film fan. I love the craft.
I was just going to say, Danny Kaye, is it the vessel with the pestle or the chalice from the palace?
All of it. Every Saturday. It was brilliant because I'd go to the cinema on kids my age, 7, 8, 9, 10. We would go on a Saturday to the cinema. We'd go in the morning, all get together, about 10 of us, get there mid-morning and stay till late afternoon. And that's how we spent Saturdays watching movies. My brother used to work at the Granada Cinema in Kingston upon Thames in Surrey. And Charles could always get me free tickets. And I remember when Close Encounters of the Third Kind came back, I sat at the usher's seat at the back of the cinema. I watched that movie 3 times in a row in one day.
Wow.
Phenomenal, like phenomenal. So, I really was a film nerd from a really early age, and I didn't even know it, to be honest. I had no idea. People often ask me, how did you get into makeup? And I think it was luck. And just because I had no idea how to do it. I went to art school, studied photography, studied painting. Everyone wanted me to do graphic design, and I wanted to do makeup. So, you know, I just kept at it in the early 90s, and it found its way into film eventually.
Kind of fast forwarding, how did you get brought on to Sinners, and what was that collaboration like with Ryan?
Oh, well, Ryan and I now go back to Black Panther when we first met because because I was Chadwick's personal makeup artist on that movie. And I met Ryan there and then and absolutely loved him. There is nothing not to like about Ryan Coogler. He is one of the best men in the business. He really, really is. And I've been around now a really long time. I've been in this business, I think it's my 37th year. So I've seen a thing or two and met a few people. And every so often you get really lucky. And I feel that way working with Ryan. I'm really lucky to work with him. So we met on Black Panther. I wasn't the department head. I just did Chadwick. But Ryan and I talked designs. We talked all sorts of things, and we started to get to know each other. And then later, I carried on with Chadwick. Unfortunately, we lost him. So again, Ryan and Zinzi, his wife, and I, Ruth Carter, all of his sort of inner circle of key go-tos, we've all gone through loss. I was with Chad all the time, and so that was incredibly intense, but it broke Ryan's heart too. And so we have that in common as well. I think loss is a great natural sort of binder in a way. You share that experience, and I had done Judas and the Black Messiah for him, which he produced. Shaka King directed. I department headed and designed it. And I think he really got to sort of know me more then, but more importantly, see how I can envision skin and period work and all of that stuff realistically on camera, and also the heart that I put into it, because the heart is really important when you're doing period work. You've really got to respect the time, and be a historian. I love history. And so does Ryan. He is an absolute historian. He's a historic freak. He loves it. So, we met more on Judas. And then when it came to Sinners, I'd sort of gone off and I also work with Lakeith Stanfield. I do pretty much all of his movies. So, I'd been doing that, popping off here and there. And then I got a phone call from Zinzi, and she said, "What are you doing for the next few months?" And I was waiting to hear back from an actor actually who'd asked to put a hold on me for a movie. And I said, "Oh God, James has asked me to do this with him, but I'm not confirmed. Can you hold?" And they said, "Yes, we'll wait and see what happens." And 3 weeks went by and I still hadn't been confirmed. And in the end, I called my actor and I said, "Listen, I got Ryan Coogler wanting me to do this movie with him. And do you think there's a chance it's not going to happen? Because I need to know." And he said, "Go and do it. It's a bigger thing. Go and do it." So I did. And they were like, "Yay, we've got our first choices, so it's fantastic."
When it comes to the vampire designs and the kills, you were trying to do something a little bit different, I think. Can you tell me what the process was in developing that idea?
Yes, of course. When you go into a film that has a genre in it that has been so addressed in such a saturated way over time, the importance of reinventing it and making it fresh so that you can tell the story as well as you can is really important, in my opinion. And also, you're paying homage to the fans because, vampire lore has a huge fan base, both in literature and on film. And I really felt that we had an opportunity here to just try something different. Why are vampires always biting on the neck? Who decided that that was the only way? Why can't they bite someone anywhere? Because at the end of the day, it's about the bite. It's got nothing to do with the position of it. Leading on from that, when we had a round table meeting with everyone, and I remember the studio being part of it. And when I said that, Ryan was going, oh, he loved it. Like he went crazy for this. He was so excited at all of these suggestions. And I just saw the studio, Jeff Levine, a bunch of them from Warner's, just grinning because I think they could start to see that there was something original, not just in the writing, but in the way Ryan's team were thinking to present the audience and to have them see a new form. So definitely to behave like a beast from the Serengeti, feasting rather than just nibbling. The little two-line dribble from the fangs, I did not want that. I've got Ryan Coogler, who has done Black Panther. He has created Wakanda. He has created a nation within the continent of Africa, and he goes deep. And so if I'm going to do vampires, I want them to also represent the way my director thinks and his vision. And so to have this bestial devouring like a hyena would or a lion would at a kill, where their faces are covered from the nose down. I made mood boards and I showed him this section. I did a mood board that basically had a complete cross section from plantation workers to immigrants to Chicago gangsters, Chinese immigrants, children, you name it. And then when it came to the vampires, I just sourced images from the Serengeti and beasts. And when he saw that board, he went, I see my movie. I now know what
Wow.
my movie is going to look like. And I didn't know it before. And then the beauty of working with people that really deep dive, which is what this movie needed. When I got chit-chatting with Ruth Carter, the costume designer, Ruth had been doing exactly what I was doing too. And we had parallel images and concepts, and our approach was identical. And we had the Critics' Choice Award the other day, and I was sitting next to Ruth, and I said, "Oh my God, I love working with you so much because we have such a similar vision and approach to work." And it is this thoroughness because we really want to pay homage to everything. If it's a beast, we want to make sure it looks as fierce as possible, but also we wanted them to be sensual. We wanted them to be violent. There were many aspects to the vampires, and the fact that you didn't know it was a vampire until their eyes turned color was of paramount importance. It wasn't the fangs coming forward. Historically, in vampire films, it's always been when the fangs showed. But with Ryan, he wanted it to be the first indication was this tapetum lucidum effect on the lenses of their eyes that would indicate they were about to shift. Otherwise, they look just like you and me. And I think that everyman look of the vampire was also vital. Ryan and I had this conversation about what is it that the fans, which vampires in the history of film, let's say, did the fans resonate with the most? And it kept coming up that it was Nosferatu. And the reason behind this was because Nosferatu was fallible. He was an everyman. He was a broken-hearted human, but he wasn't human. He had feelings. And this is what the fan base could relate to. So to have this same everyman with feeling, Stack is a whole dichotomy of emotion. He really doesn't know, even though he's so flash with his cash. But and he's a loose cannon. But Stack is so deep, as Mary gets him to reveal in The Duke before he is a vampire. So all of these styles played in how we got the vampires to evolve.
Yeah. And I'm curious, like, I don't know how early on into the process you knew it was going to be shot on IMAX, but I'm curious if that informed any other decisions, like the amount of canvas you have to play with, the amount of detail people are going to be able to see, or if that affected anything at all.
Honestly, Andrew, that didn't affect anything. I come from a very old school art background, and I've always believed in we present to the highest, no matter what format we're working in. I My eyesight, if I'm looking at someone that is 10 inches from my face and I'm looking at makeup, it is a failure. I want people to not know that someone has full makeup on, even when they are inches away from them. I didn't know that we were shooting on IMAX. I hadn't got a clue, but I've always preached, taught, and delivered this sort of very, very highly translucent, but with correction, with all the augmentations kind of work. Um, and not everybody does it. It's my style intrinsically. You know, one of the reasons I got into the States was because they called me what was it? Something alien, an exceptional alien. And that was my thing, because I could do high-end beauty. I'd done 10 years of editorial. I did prosthetics, special effects makeup, and I did character makeup and hair and knotting. And in the EU, in Europe, we get trained a lot and for a long time. But this art background that I had really enables me to paint. And that is something that they don't teach as much anymore. It's something that I needed to teach the New Orleans crew because they'd never done work like it. So before filming happened, I had to bring my crew that I hadn't worked with before up to speed. And even my assistant department head, Ned, who came along, I said, Ned, you don't need to look at this. You're a great artist. He said, no, I really want to learn this because this is next level stuff. And I don't see it very often. And so I know that the techniques were different. But for me, it is like painting an oil painting, and that works for IMAX.
And when you say the painting technique that you're talking about, are you talking about application and the materials you use, or how does that work?
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, you know, and especially here, I have to say, you know, there are a 1 to 5% of people that have exceptional skills at doing really high end work, and they work all the time, and they are in all your favorite films. Um, and what I'm talking about here is having the ability to be an alchemist, to mix paints, to customize formulations so that you can make it work for the project that you are doing it on. That, you know, for example, so as someone who has their own cosmetic line, I created products after Black Panther because I couldn't find what I was looking for on that movie. And when I was doing Chad, I needed I changed his skin tone completely. I painted his entire head and body to make him look more like he was of Nigerian or West African descent. And Chadwick was of Nigerian descent, you know, and you could see it in his features, you could see it in his undertones, in his skin tone. But if you don't sort of do that homework and understand how you can change formulations and adapt them, um, that is what gives you the ability to do these translucent layers that you can then put subtle shimmers in, or layer and seal a red in so that you can bring up the blood, so to speak, the complexion. It's a particularly important skill when you are working with varying shades of melanin, because the minute you start going deeper, it is a beautiful thing cinematically. Deep skin is magnificent on film because it has this reflective quality to it that you just don't get in other skin tones. And the deeper the skin tone, the more magnificent those reflective qualities can be. By the same turn, however, it will be neutralized by its environment. So let's say we're shooting Wumi, who played Annie. We're shooting her under all of those beautiful green leaves just outside of her house when she first sees smoke he's paying homage to their deceased daughter, and you see her under the green leaves. We completely color corrected her again on set to accommodate for the green reflection, drawing the richness of her already deep melanin, because Wunmi is very deep. So we put the reds back into her. We put more oranges into her. We put some golds to pick up sunlight into her so that her skin red is normal. It is a masterclass in color theory. The same when we go inside. Whenever there are shades of blue or costumes that will reflect on skin, you have to look at this and make these decisions where you're looking down the lens of the camera, or you're looking on the HD monitor, not just the little generic sort of screen that they give you to watch for continuity. You've got to look at it on HD, and you've got to look down the lens, and you see these nuances. And I see them all the time. And it's the difference between skin looking alive or looking yellow and ashy on camera. And also, I had a complete no powder. Powder was banned. I do not use powder on skin ever. There are many other ways we can get the same effect without clouding the skin. And with melanin, I just want it to look reflective. It is a beautiful thing to photograph, and I want it to look as good as possible.
Looking back at Sinners now that it's been out for a little bit, I'm sure you've seen it plenty of times. Is there any scene specific look that you're most proud of, or like a risk that paid off the most?
There are two things. I mean, first of all, with the Duke scene, we have here multiple layers of ancestors and future ancestors and all sorts of things. And the two makeups to me that stood out were the Chinese ancestors from Beijing Opera. And these were Water Sleeves and Monkey King. And Water Sleeves was scripted. Brian wrote that into the script very much. And I knew it was going to be a beautiful makeup. Did a ton of research for it, researched all the textures. We looked at how artists were painting themselves. We went on YouTube and found all of these amazing YouTube videos with backstage makeups in Beijing and how they're painting. And then also, I am a huge fan of Chinese mythology, always have been since I was a child. I used to watch a show called The Water Margin, which was in the 70s. And then Monkey Magic was in the 80s. It was a great little show. And I really felt if we were doing Water Sleeves for Grace Chow as her ancestor, that Bo Chow needed an ancestor for balance and for visual balance, because Water Sleeves was so colorful. And so I said to Yao, who played Bo, I said, look, I've got some ideas, but if you could choose any character from Chinese mythology, which character would it be to be your ancestor in Beijing Opera? And he said, Monkey King. And that was the exact character I wanted to do, because Monkey is one of my favorite characters. He ate all the heavenly peaches. He got thrown out of heaven. He had to go on this tale with Pigsy and Tripitaka and do all of this. So I knew Monkey, and I am a monkey, by the way. It's my Chinese sign. So I did a board. I went to Ryan on set and I said, Ryan, can I do this character? You've got Water Sleeves for Grace. We really need something for Bo. Can we please do Monkey King? And he looked at me and he went, whoa, that's amazing. He said, as long as it doesn't cost me any more money, we can do it. And so I had Ned Neidhart, who is a great painter, my assistant department head. Ned, we took pictures of Yao. We brought it into Procreate, which is an app on an iPad that you can draw onto, and he started mapping the design out on Yao's face, and then he would send me pictures because I'd be on set with Mike. I was so busy that it's like this is how we had to do it, through text, because I just never stopped. And he really planned out that makeup and did test after test with it, developing again, customizing products so they looked like they were the same texture that a theatrical artist would use, but that they survive humidity, sweat, dancing, friction, all of those things. So Monkey King for me was a triumph, as was Water Sleeves. But also, honestly, if I look at character makeup, and character makeup is really overlooked in all of these awards. Everyone always focuses on prosthetics. And it's such a shame that their eye is trained for the obvious and not the subtle. But it's the subtlety that actually tells the story. And I think that Wunmi looked magnificent. Alison worked so hard to do Wunmi and to get her right. And she didn't, I would give her notes. I would say, Alison, look, and she the learning curve that she had as an artist over the whole filming was magnificent. The artist that she finished the movie was not the artist she started at. And that's a beautiful thing to see, the evolution of your team. And she worked really, really hard. She also did a great job on Lily, who played Grace Chow, because that was a very subtle makeup, including Lily had tattooed eyebrows on. So the very first thing she had to do was remove the tattoo ink by color correcting it and then hand painting hair to look like a natural brow again. So there was that. And then I've got to say, I think the way Mike looked as Smoke, I love the difference between Smoke and Stack. Very subtle, but huge in their subtlety, very different color palettes, all of that. So I think that those for me are the standout makeups, non-prosthetic, if we're talking non-prosthetic.
Well, what's the process like when you're trying to come up with a subtle difference between Smoke and Stack, for example? How did that how did that journey start? What was the process of deciding what one look was going to be versus the other?
Well, first of all, you have to assess the characters. You read the script, and the very first thing that stands out is that Stack is a charmer. He's living in the moment. He's got this kilowatt smile. Smoke is like an old man. He sustains all of the grief. He takes care of Stack. He carries the weight of the world on his shoulder. These are two ex-servicemen. They've seen war and they've seen death, and then they go and they're hanging out with Capone in Chicago, so also they're chancers, they're hustlers, and they have swag and charisma, but Smoke is the old soul, and Stack is the charmer. He's the raconteur, and so when Ruth showed the costume and I'm looking at the color palettes that she chose, Smoke in the blues, and Smoke was the real blues actually, and Stack in these beautiful shades of deep plum and maroon, such saturated technicolor, glorious colors. But what immediately happens, of course, is you can see the color theory there is they are the antithesis of each other, pretty much. You've got primary, secondary, and tertiary colors, and if you look at tertiaries, they are opposite of each other. And so that's how, when I'm looking at their characters, I put into Smoke. I kept Smoke very open and undone. He carried the weight of the world in his face. I used mauves and blues and deep greens in his complexion, under his eyes, a look of worry painted in. The guy doesn't sleep enough. It reads in his face, making him a little bit puffier, keeping his eyebrows a little bit more disheveled, his moustache a little bit more loose and open, keeping his jawline slightly more rounded. It gives the idea of more of a middle-aged man, older than his years. Whereas with Stack, his brows were more defined. I hand painted hairs to make them look stronger and fuller and give him a stronger brow line. The color palette, whereas Smoke would be mauves and blues and deep sort of umbers and browns, Stack were joyous. He had little shades of pistachio green and powder pinks and shades of shrimp in his complexion to lift his complexion. His moustache was more dynamic and filled a little bit more, painted in to strengthen it. His jawline was accentuated for strength, and sort of the underlying contour would be taken all the way under his jaw to well under his ear, so that you got this more dynamic edge to his face shape. Everything about Smoke, his complexion was clear, whereas Stack's was more mottled. very, very subtle, but needed. And the challenges there were the quick changes, because sometimes Mike would have to change from one to the other really quickly. And to not lose the essence, but with Smoke as well, as the movie progresses and he's in his white tank, with Mike, he had a full body makeup, a full patina, dirt, grime, sweat, aged blood, you name it, he had it, as well as his face. And by the end of that movie, when we're looking at the scene with him and him and Annie, and it's pretty much his death scene, but Autumn shot it so exquisitely, and it had so much soul. The whole set was crying. Every
Wow.
single member of the crew was crying on that shooting day. It was just so emotional watching him. And Mike was utterly magnificent. And Ryan was my God, what a brilliant performance Ryan got out of him. It really stands a testimony to their relationship, but also all of the work that costume, hair, makeup, lighting, and cinematography put together to encapsulate that moment, because it felt timeless, you know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Sian, before we let you go, is there a way people can follow what you're up to next, what you're working on? Do you have like a social media account or some place where people can see what you're up to?
I do. You can follow me on Instagram. I have a couple of accounts there. My blog, all about me stuff, is London Brush Co, London Brush Co, because my company used to be called London Brush Company. If you want to check out my makeup, you can look at Sian Richards London Official on Instagram.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome. Well, this has been fun. It's been a lovely chat. And when you're working on something next, the door is always open. If you want to chat again, yeah, hit us up. It'd be fun.
thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, don't hang up yet. I just want to say a couple of things before we let you go, but we enjoyed it. It's been great fun.
Thanks, Jeff. Me too.
Thank you for listening to the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, a podcast created and hosted by filmmakers Jeff Stolen and Andrew Lamping, and produced by Melody Lopez.
Our theme song was composed by Stephen D. Bennett.
Make sure to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on, and stay tuned for future episodes.